Welcome back, St. Louis. This is Sister Felicia, and we are back again. Make sure you go ahead and tag 10 friends and bring them in. Guys, we have some information we're going to share with you from the state capitol. But before we do that, we want to go back to Brother Zaki Baruti, who was talking about, representation in reference to our elected officials. Brother Zaki.
Yes, and as I was mentioning on the other side of the break, that it is projected that black people in this country are 14% of the population, yet there's over 500,000 publicly elected positions in this country, and we hold only about 6% of that total number. And when you look at two of the most powerful positions in this country, positions of governorships as well as U.S. Senate, I ran for governor in 1984. Out of a concept that we was pushing to address that issue. Mm-hmm. At the time I ran in 1984, out of 50 state governors, 0 were black. If we move forward today, and I project we 14% of the population, 14% of 50 is right at 6 or 7. We should have at least 6 black governors at least. Mm-hmm. However, in terms of the reality, 2024, there's only 1. And I would ask everybody in the audience, where is that one who's elected as a governor? And that's in the state of Maryland. When you look at the United States Senate, out of 100 U.S. senators, conceptually and ideally we should have, out of 100, if we're 14% of 100 is 14.
Yes.
We should have at least 14. But how many do we actually have? Only 4. So we have a lot of struggle to get our parity, and then at the same time, there's concerted efforts to disenfranchise black people with different bills. I think there's over a couple hundred bills that are trying to disenfranchise voters, predominantly mm-hmm. black voters. Mm-hmm. So that's the struggle that we have to, and we as an organization, Universal African Peoples Organization, we always are pushing that concept called proportionate political representation.
Proportionate political representation. Mm-hmm.
And we salute the candidacy of one of your stars that be on the show, Carla May, who's
Absolutely.
running for
United States Senator. Yes.
And as an organization, that's why Carla Coffey Wright ran for U.S. Senate. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because actually in the state of Missouri, there has never, ever been a black statewide elected official.
And that's a good segue into where we're headed, because that really sets the tone for what we're experiencing right now in the state of Missouri. So you spoke about it at the national level. This morning, we have Denise Lieberman on the call with us this morning. Good morning, Miss Denise Lieberman.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Denise is with the Missouri Protection Coalition. And we'll have you, Denise, just tell a little bit about your organization. And then we want to talk about SJR 74.
Absolutely. The Missouri Voter Protection Coalition is Missouri's statewide nonpartisan voter protection table. We work to ensure that all voices can be heard. We believe that voting should be free, fair, and accessible to all Missourians. But we particularly focus on the populations of people whose voices have been unheard and, in fact, kept out of the political process for far too long. And just like Brother Zaki Baruti just said, these include communities of color, low-wage workers, young voters, our seniors, voters with disabilities. We know that right here in Missouri, there is a voter registration gap. 85% of white Missourians are registered to vote, but only about 65% of African American Missourians are registered to vote. Only about 54% of Hispanic Missourians are registered to vote. And we have to change that, because voting is how we build power. Voting is how we exercise our voice. And that is exactly why we have been so focused on what's going on in the Missouri legislature this year, because they are trying to take away the voices of Missouri's voters through enacting restrictions to the citizen initiative process. This is a process that we've had on the books here in Missouri for more than a century, more than 100 years, before women had the right to vote, before African Americans had truly the right to vote. we still had majority rule as the law of the land in Missouri. And now lawmakers are trying to take that away. Why? Because our communities are organizing and they are starting to build power, registering people to vote and getting them out to vote. And the citizen initiative process is what allows people to raise issues that they care about. They care about before Missouri's voters. And that's what we've seen. And when Missourians have done that, y'all know what they've done? Mm-hmm. They've raised the minimum wage. Yes. They defeated right to work, which would have blocked anti-discrimination laws. They legalized marijuana. They decreed nonpartisan redistricting. They supported Medicaid expansion. Mm-hmm. All these are things that our lawmakers would not do for us, that the voters of Missouri took to their own and did through the citizen initiative process. And that's exactly the reason why lawmakers focus so hard on trying to make that process much, much harder. I got to say, Felicia and Zaki, Missouri Senate Democrats stood up for more than 50 hours this past week. 50, 5-0, no sleep, overnight.
Mm. And they were doing, explain to our listening audience exactly what they were doing.
They were standing up against deception in this bill. So not only have lawmakers tried to make it harder for citizens to make their voices heard through the citizen initiative process, but because they knew it would be so unpopular, they added in deceptive, what we call ballot candy. Things that are already the law, but get people wondering what's going on.
Yes.
And our senators stood up to stop that. So, for example, one of the measures in this resolution, which was designed to end majority rule, let's just go back to what this was all about. Mm-hmm. It was about ending the ability of Missourians to pass measures by majority rule. That is a fundamental.
And what percentage majority rule would be? Is that 50% plus one?
Yeah, 50% plus one. Look, mm-hmm. Y'all, we learned this in kindergarten, that is how fairness works. When the most people vote for something, it wins. Mm-hmm. Lawmakers knew they couldn't win that way, and that is why they were trying to make it harder. But because they knew that Missourians didn't like that and knew that it was unfair, they added things like, only U.S. citizens can vote. Mm-hmm. Guess what? That's already the law. But if you went to the polls and you saw that on your ballot, only citizens should be able to vote, you'd be like, well, of course. And I thought that was already the case, but maybe it's not. Maybe I should vote for this. Mm-hmm. And it was designed to trick voters. And shame on them. Shame on lawmakers for doing that, because that is deceptive. And thank you to the lawmakers that stood up and filibustered. And I'll tell you what, they stood up for more than 50 hours to the point that they wore the other side down. Yes. They knew they could not beat them.
So, Denise, just for the listening audience, I know they stood up and they utilized a well-known process called filibuster. Why don't you explain to the audience what is a filibuster so that people can know how a slim minority of Democrats was able to block the supermajority Republicans from being the hypocrites that they were in terms of, they're supposed to be a democracy, but they're trying to keep people from voting and expressing themselves through those initiatives, referendum initiatives. So explain for the audience's sake a filibuster.
Thank you, Brother Zaki. I mean, it should be the case that our lawmakers are talking about the actual issues that are in the legislation, but instead they were playing politics. They were playing politics and trying to trick Missouri voters by adding in all of this, what we call ballot candy. So thankfully, there were a group of Senate Democrats that stood up and said, I'm not going to stand for you lying to voters. We are going to stand up. And a filibuster is where you take the floor when a measure gets called up. And as long as you continue to talk, you continue to hold the floor. The problem is that if you sit down, the other side can take the floor and they can call a vote. So Senate Democrats stood up. This measure got called up on the floor of the Senate on Monday of this past week, and they did not sit down for more than 50 hours. 50 overnight. 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m. And we were sending out all of our partners at the Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. I was having them call those senators and tell them, thank you, and here's why we support you. And they were reading those messages on the floor because they needed messages to talk about and to talk about why they were doing this. And they stuck to it.
And then just a little bit before that, the Republicans had a 41-hour filibuster, maybe about the week or so before that. And so for the, like you say, and they're the majority, the super majority, and then the minorities, the Democrats, they come in and they had some of the Republicans that were with them, you know, supporting them on removing that ballot candy. And I think that's important to say that there were some Republicans who believed in democracy and was like, no, we're not standing for this. So share with us, if this measure would have passed, then it would give a small percentage of people that could go and overthrow the majority rule. Give us that information.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And so I got to give a shout out here because, yes, you're right. There were senators that stood up to filibuster and did not speak for 3 full days, like Senator Lauren Arthur, Senator Doug Beck, Senator Carla May, Senator Tracy McCreary, Angela Mosley, John Rizzo, Steve Roberts, Barbara Washington, and Brian Williams. There were also Republicans that stood up as well against this dangerous ballot candy because they believed that if this was going to pass, it should pass on its own accord and not through deception. And this includes senators like Rusty Black, Justin Brown, Mike Burstenatter, Mike Sirpote, Sandy Crawford, Carla Eskler, Elaine Gannon, Lincoln Howe, and Caleb Roden.
Yes.
And they all deserve our thanks because they stopped the deception from happening. But the truth of the matter is that the underlying bill itself is really problematic. It says that majority rule is no longer going to be the law of the land. One person, one vote. No longer the law of the land in Missouri. And that defies our fundamental understanding of fairness, that the majority wins. And instead, it allows some votes to weigh more than others. And that's really what our problem with this was. And the truth is, that's why the vast majority of Missourians don't agree with it. And that's why those senators added that ballot candy in to these measures to make it seem more appealing. So we really want to thank the senators on both sides of the aisle that stood up and said, we don't win this by deceiving people.
We have a question for you here. Sister Coffee has a question for you.
Really not much of a question, but more of a comment. When just going back just a little bit, when we talked about the voting, and she shared with us how 50, you said 50, about 55% of African Americans are not voting in Missouri. when you was giving us the stats on that, 65%. Right. Okay.
Yes.
And
not registered.
Not registered. Right. So definitely can't vote if they're not registered. So we definitely have to do better on that. We complain a lot, but we have to get out there and vote. For the viewers that are listening, you have to vote. You have to understand how important. It's not always about money and not pumping myself. But when I ran, I came in second place on the Democratic ballot, and I had less than $5,000. And the lady who beat me, she had $40 million.
$40 million.
$40 million. And then it was about 8 people behind me who all had hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. So votes is what win elections. And I just have to say, I'm rooting for Sister Carla May.
Yes.
Have to, because the thing is that today, a sister in Maryland just won off of, she had $6 million budget, and she ran up against her mate had $65 million, and she smoked him.
Okay.
She just won, so kudos to her.
Yes.
And all she had was $6 million. So all money ain't the shot call all the time.
Yes.
The people got to get out and vote.
Yes.
Now, Maryland has 3 times as many blacks as we do here in Missouri, but they got up, they showed up and showed out.
Yes.
And that's what we need our people to do.
Yes.
And the other importance of folks who are listening to understand the importance of voting. First of all, historically, we were denied the right to vote, and there were many people who fought for that right to have, who died and were in prison for us having that right. But voting is important because whoever you elect establish social policy. Just as Denise just made mention, there have over the years been many young brothers who've been incarcerated for marijuana.
Yes.
But now it has been passed where it's legal, but that's only through the process of electing folks and having those initiatives, citizens initiatives, to put that on the ballot to get the majority of the people to either vote for it or against, legalization. So social policies is a direct outcome as to who is in office and affecting, social change. I'll give you one other example. The Ferguson uprising. At the time that Mike Brown was murdered, in Ferguson itself, which, by the way, I used to live in Ferguson, and I actually lived where Mike Brown was at, and I was organizing in the apartments, but they would not renew my lease, and I had to leave there back in the early 70s.
Okay.
But at the time of his murder, Ferguson was 68% black. 68% black. Yet the city council at that time of 6 members, along with the mayor, only 1 was black. As a direct outcome of that unbalanced situation, you had a police force that was 53 police officers, only 3 were black. So that does what? Taking away jobs from our people, as well as people from the community being able to police themselves. So that's a direct outcome in terms of if you don't vote. So I just want to emphasize that.
Thank you. So, and Denise, we thank you for joining us on this morning. We have 2 minutes left. Before we go, I want you to give that information for Power Hour. I love Power Hour. It gives us so much. It comes every 10 a.m. every morning. Give us that information, how our listeners can become a part of advocacy and what they can do.
Absolutely. Look, we only overcome this when we come together. When we come together, our voices are powerful and strong. The right to vote belongs to each and every one of us, and that is truly our power. Just remember this. If your vote wasn't so powerful, they would not be spending so much time and resources to try and take it away. So we gather every Monday at 10 a.m. in St. Louis, in Missouri. You can text MOVPC to 66866 to get on the list, to get that Zoom link. We meet by Zoom, or you can just email us info@movpc.org. And we need all hands on deck because these elections need our voices if we are going to save our democracy.
Yes.
And can I just say, keep up the great work, Denise. Keep up the great work.
Right. And make sure you look her up on Facebook, right? Look up that organization on Facebook, Missouri Voter Protection Coalition. And so thank you again for stopping by. You've been listening to the Freeman Bosley Jr. Show. Keep it on lock.
Quit playing.
Oh!